So in this video that I haven't thought ahead of time about, we are going to use our projectiles to collide with the enemies. So let's get started. So we got our little projectiles and we can fire them using the space bar, and let's say we'll start with one enemy. And so let's actually we need to cycle through the iterators of each and check for collisions. So we'll go projectile collides with enemy, and we will use this. So this is a for cycling through the projectile array, and we also want to cycle through the enemy array. So we're actually going to use a different counter, so we'll use counter 2. So counter plus plus, counter 2 plus plus. And so now here's how you do collisions. So pay careful attention. So we go if projectile array counter, because that was a counter right here for that one, counter dot rect dot get global bounds. You need to use rect dot get global bounds dot intersects, and then this is the thing that we're checking if the projectile actually intersected with. So we use enemy array counter 2 dot rect dot get global bounds, and then we close the brackets. And then if something did in fact actually collide, we can notify ourselves right here for now. We'll just say collision, and just to see if this works, what we'll do is we'll run this and check our cout. Let's make this a bit smaller. So let's line up and take a shot. Oh, there we go, collision. So we hit it. So our collision does in fact work. So if we collide with something, well, I think that thing should probably be taking damage, right? So let's go enemy array and then counter 2, because that's the specific one that was hit. The enemy, we'll go dot HP, and then we'll go minus minus, so we're decreasing its HP. But we don't actually have an HP for our enemy class yet. So what we'll do is we'll go int HP equals, let's say, 3. There we go. I don't know why there's a... There we go. Okay. Int HP minus minus. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set something up so that if... actually, we'll do it in there. We'll say if enemy array counter 2 dot HP is less than or equal to 0, then we'll say that the enemy is dead. So we'll say enemy array counter 2 dot alive equals false. So we actually need to set the Boolean for being alive. So we'll just say Boolean alive equals true. So it'll be born being alive. And then right here, we just set it to false. So we are going to create another cycle through just below this collision detection system. And we can just use counter again instead, because in the last one it was the projectiles that was using the counter. So that's fine to use it here. And we're going to say if enemy array counter dot alive equals false, then what we want to do is we want to go enemy array dot erase, and then this is where the iterator comes in handy. You need to use the iterator. I don't believe you can do this by using the counter, so you might be very frustrated if you try and use the counter in any sort of syntax here. So I kept trying to do that a few months ago. And then just go iter4 because that's the iterator we're using. And then just break. If you don't break and you try and cycle through to the next iterator, you might get like some really shitty errors happening basically because we're actually deleting one of the iterators. And you might be able to try iter4 minus minus, but I really wouldn't risk it. There could be like some memory problems happening. So we just break out. And the break actually breaks out of here. And then the next cycle through, if there's another enemy that needed to be deleted, it will delete it. This is essentially popping it. It's like taking it out of the enemy array. So we can add things in with push. And then we're actually just getting rid of it with this one. So this is delete dead enemy. So we don't really need to see that there's a collision there. We can notify ourselves on the console and say enemy has been obliterated. Lols. Okay. And it looks like my laptop's almost dead. Okay. And we should actually be able to kill the enemy now. So, bam. Enemy has died. So we look at our console here. Enemy has been obliterated. Lols. And we actually need to do the same thing for our projectile. So what we're going to do is add projectile.h, and we will say boolean destroy equals false, and we will go to our main, and we are now going to make it so that the projectile array counter dot, was it destroy? Destroy equals true. And so we're essentially going to do the same thing that we did here with the deleting the enemy, but with the projectile when the destroy equals true. So we go if destroy equals true, and this is a projectile. If you're copying and pasting, you need to really be very careful because you might have left some of the stuff from the previous one. Like if you would have left iter4, it would have been like, what, iter4? So just iter. By the way, if you ever get some like crazy errors and you can never really figure out what's wrong because you thought you fixed it, perhaps your Xcode is like had sort of memory problem and you might need to actually like recreate the project. I know that's bad to say, but that does happen at times. So yeah, projectile erase, and then we break, and that should delete the projectile. So that should work. Okay, so bam. Whoa. Bam. Okay, so we're firing like a million projectiles. That's why we couldn't really tell that a projectile was deleted. Just to confirm that it was deleted, let's create a C out. Let's say worked. Yes, Munger. It's okay. Dog. So bam. Okay, let's see if a projectile was deleted. So it said it worked. So 3 projectiles hit, and they were all deleted. So I'm just going to plug my laptop in pretty quickly, and then what we're going to do is actually make it so that our projectiles can only be fired like every so often, so that we're not firing like a zillion at once. So just 1 second. All right. Okay. So we got the laptop plugged in, and it looks like our projectiles are hitting it, but we need to create a timer. So I'm going to go to a different project just to make things easier. And what we need is a clock, first of all. So we're just going to paste these clocks in our variables. So SF clock, and we're naming the type clock, clock 2 and clock 3. We do not need that. Then the next thing we need the elapsed time, and we're going to put that in our actual game loop right after our window clear. So for each of our clocks, we're going to go SF time, and we're going to use elapsed one for the first one equals clock.get elapsed time. So this elapsed time is going to store the time that's been taken with the clock. And we need to find the actual timer that I've set up before. Here's one. And we don't actually need all of these right now, all 3 clocks, but it might come in handy later, so I just figured I'd add it. Yeah. So when we press space, that's when we're firing it. So we will go here. So if elapsed one as seconds, we could go as milliseconds or something like that, is greater than or equal to 2 seconds, then and only then will we allow ourselves to press space and actually instantiate that projectile. So 2 seconds is a little bit brutal, so let's try making it 0.5. And then what we're going to do is restart the clock. So it's going to restart from 0 and start counting up again until it reaches greater than 0.5, and then we can fire and it's reset again. So that's how that timer works. So now if I'm firing, see how there's this delay? So let's try making our missiles a little bit bigger so this is easier. We'll go to, or our projectiles rather. Our constructor, and it's actually set as a 10 by 10. So let's try making it 25 by 25. Might be pretty big, but whatever. So there, we got some bigger missiles happening. So we just fired 3 times, and on the third, it did actually destroy the projectile and the enemy. So that works pretty good. We could speed it up even more. Main. So we go like 0.25, and on our projectiles, we could even increase the movement speed of those two if we wanted them to travel faster. Maybe not a good idea. So we go boom, 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 boom. Bam. Okay. So I'm going to show you something important that I actually should have included in the window, one of the first videos about windows. Okay, we have to find the window. It's right here. We go window.set frame rate limit, and we're just going to set it to 60. So we're kind of getting like sporadic lag and stuff like that. This is actually going to affect all of the movement speed and stuff like that too, because we were like getting maxed out frames. So boom, boom, there, fire 2, and this third one should kill him. So now we can actually see the like movement a bit better, how he's walking. So let's have some fun, and let's, before we do something boring to finish the video, let's do something fun and spawn a crap ton of enemies and maybe increase our firing rate a bit. So we'll go 0.1, and hopefully we won't like crash or something random. I'm not sure what's happening here. There we go. Okay, so now we can fire pretty fast. Nice. That spawned some enemies. So it's actually going through the arrays, and it's going to have to compare all of them with the projectiles. So boom, 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 boom. So it might cause a little bit of lag on my laptop. Sucks. So we're actually destroying these dudes. And so just how we created a collision with the projectile and the enemy, it would be just as easy to create a collision with the enemy or the enemy's projectile that they fire with our player. And we could have our player have maybe 10 HP, and if we got hit 10 times, it could destroy our player, or we could go to a state that is game over. But we're going to get into all that fun stuff in future videos. So there's a problem happening here. Our missiles, we fire them and they last forever, which means they're being added to this vector array container that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're traveling indefinitely. They're taking up our CPU power on the computer, our RAM, and it's really a pain in the butt. So we need to actually create a timer. We could use a counter if we're lazy. We don't want to use the clock. And it could only allow the projectiles to last a certain amount of time before we set it equal to destroy. So it's a kind of a boring thing. That's what I was getting at, but we kind of should do it for performance sake. We don't want these bullets traveling into infinity. So we go projectile. We can go int counter lifetime. equals, let's just try 100 at first. Counter lifetime. So we're going to set one called lifetime. This should actually be 0. We want the lifetime to be 100. So that's a counter. So every single frame we are updating the projectile that was instantiated. We're increasing the counter lifetime, and once the counter lifetime goes from 0 and is increased to the lifetime of the projectile, we're going to set it equal to destroy. And as we wrote before, right, where was it? We had delete projectile. Once the projectile is set to destroy true, we delete it. So we already have that set up. All we needed to do was change on that object equal to destroy true. So that should be it. I mean, the projectile should be being destroyed after a certain period of time. So let's try firing it. Let's try making the it delete them quicker so that we can actually see it being deleted, just to prove it. It's the lifetime that we have to change. So let's change it to 10. Okay, so you see how it only travels to right here? That's because the lifetime is being reached the max and it's being destroyed. So you can do all sorts of things with this. Like, let's say your player gets a power up. Hey, maybe you could be firing 3 projectiles and they could be going out at 45-degree angles too. Or you could have a nova projectiles that spray out from all directions randomly from 0 to 360 degrees perhaps, as sort of like a vector. You could maybe pick up a power up and now your projectiles move extremely fast. Maybe they move really slow, but they're super big. Maybe their lifetime becomes like ridiculously long and they bounce off of stuff. It's up to your imagination. So it's pretty cool. And that's the fun part. It's messing around with this. And that's why it's so convenient that we set all of these things right here, because we can have attack damage, and we can actually, instead of just lowering the HP of the enemy by 1, because we went minus, what we could do is we could actually access the attack damage. So we could go minus equals, and we can access the projectile array counter dot attack damage. So now we'll be able to kill the enemy in 1 hit because our attack damage was 5. So let's see that. There, so that worked. So, I mean, we could make it so that, hey, maybe you get a really good weapon and the attack damage goes up substantially. And that would automatically be processed because of this little line of code that we added right here. So let's change it back to being 1, the attack damage. And we could reorganize this if we want, because it's not the nicest thing right here. So we have we don't really need that comment. The counter lifetime is just the counter, so it doesn't really matter. Update movement, don't really need that method. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, we made our projectiles actually collide with the enemy and do damage to their HP. So how about in the next video, which may be kind of self-explanatory, we're going to make it so that when the enemy's wrecked hits our player, then our player takes damage. And perhaps our player bounces backward or something. And the way we could do that is our player is facing a certain direction. So we know that because the player is facing a certain direction, we could bounce it back the opposite direction, but that might be a little bit glitchy depending on where the enemy is. So we could actually tell where our player is and where the enemy is, and then sort of compare the positions and then knock them back based upon those positive and negatives. But that might get a little bit confusing. So how about we just start with the collision of the enemy and the player, and our player being dealt damage. So see you in the next video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and thumbs up if you learned anything.